Welcome to AP Biology. This video is on the endocrine system. The nervous system and the endocrine system function hand in hand in the body. The nervous system is going to function in coordination. It's going to allow one part of your body to communicate with another part of your body in order to coordinate activities like muscle contraction. The endocrine system is going to function much more in control. It's going to be used to regulate processes within your body. Processes like growth, processes like metabolism, blood glucose levels, blood calcium levels, and many others. The response of the nervous system is extremely fast, and the response depends upon the pathway. The response of the endocrine system is going to be much slower, and the response is going to depend upon the signal. In the case of the endocrine system, the signal is going to be the hormone. Hormones are released into the bloodstream using endocrine cells that we would call glands. Since hormones are released into the bloodstream, they take a long time to get to their destination. Their destination is going to be target cells. Target cells are cells that have a receptor for the hormone. All cells that do not have the receptor for the hormone will ignore the message. There are also nervous system cells that have the ability to release hormones. We call these cells neurosecretory cells. A good example of one of these would be the pituitary gland. It's a region of the brain that happens to release hormones into the bloodstream. We can look at a basic example of how the endocrine system regulates physiological processes. Here we're going to look at the process of molting in insects. Here we see the life stages, or the stages in the life cycle of the butterfly. You have three stages: the larva, the pupa, and the adult. The movement from one stage to the next is caused by three hormones within the insect. One is called juvenile hormone. Juvenile hormone keeps the insect whatever it is, keeps it in that stage. Brain hormone is going to allow for growth, and ecdysone is going to cause molting to take place. It's going to cause the insect to move from one stage to the next. So you can see in the larval stage, when it's a caterpillar, juvenile hormone is going to be released, and juvenile hormone keeps the caterpillar a caterpillar. Brain hormone is going to allow growth. When the larva reaches a particular size, ecdysone is released, and ecdysone is going to cause it to molt and go from being a caterpillar to a pupa. Ecdysone will then trigger the movement from the pupa to the adult. You can see that these stages in the life cycle of the butterfly are regulated or controlled using hormones. Hormones operate by initiating signal transduction pathways. They allow cell communication to take place. Cell communication takes place in three steps. It begins with the signal molecule, called a ligand, which in this case will be a hormone, binding to a receptor in the cell membrane. Once the hormone binds to a receptor in the cell membrane, it's going to initiate a transduction pathway. This usually involves passing the message throughout the cell using protein kinases or other second messengers. This is going to lead to some type of cellular response. Whether or not a cell can respond to a hormone depends upon whether or not it has the receptor for that hormone. The response itself is going to depend upon the pathway within the cell. By having different pathways within the cells, it allows different cells to have different responses to the same hormone. There are two types of ligands that we're going to see in the endocrine system, and the first type is called a local regulator. Local regulators are released by glands called paracrine glands. They don't get released into the bloodstream. They get released locally into a tissue and only affect nearby cells that have receptors for them. The first local regulator is called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is used for many different reasons within the body. Its major function is in dilation of blood vessels, so this triggers vasodilation. Nitric oxide is also used to kill cancer cells and to kill bacterial cells within the body as well. The most important local regulator for you to know is the growth factor. Growth factors are proteins that are going to stimulate cell division. So this is going to allow growth in an area, it's going to allow repair in an area of your body. If you remember, they function at the G1 checkpoint in the cell cycle, and they're going to initiate a series of steps that is going to lead to a cell dividing. The last local regulator for you to know is the prostaglandin. It's a modified fatty acid. It's going to induce muscle contractions of the uterine wall during childbirth. It also plays a role in inflammation. It's going to intensify pain in an area of your body that has damage to it. Hormones released by endocrine glands are going to travel throughout the bloodstream, and they're going to enter target cells. There are two basic types of hormones that are polar and hormones that are nonpolar. Hormones that are polar, for instance, that are made up of proteins, are going to bind to receptors on the cell membrane. Hormones that are nonpolar are going to go right through the cell membrane and bind to receptors within the cell. An example of a hormone that is nonpolar, which is going to go directly through the cell membrane, is the steroid hormone. These are hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. They look very similar to cholesterol. They go right through the cell membrane. They're going to bind to receptors instead on the nuclear envelope within the cell. Once the steroid hormone binds to the receptor, it forms a complex, and that entire complex enters the nucleus. This complex acts as an activator. An activator is a type of transcription factor that's going to begin transcription of a gene. It's going to initiate the process of protein synthesis, which is eventually going to lead to the production of a protein. Steroid hormones are very important for your body because they regulate the process of protein synthesis. In this case, working as a transcription factor that begins the production of a protein. Here we see some of the major endocrine glands within the body. We'll be covering most of these glands. The only ones here that we're not going to be covering in depth. Number one is going to be the pineal gland in the brain, which is going to release a hormone called melatonin, and melatonin helps you to sleep. The thymus gland, which is located in your chest, is going to release a hormone called thymosin, which is going to play a role in the creation of immune system cells. All these other glands we're going to cover in more depth. Many hormones that are released within your body are tropic hormones. Tropic hormones do not have any direct responses. Instead, they travel from one gland to another gland and cause the second gland to then release hormones. So tropic hormones function more in the coordination of hormones within your body. They allow different glands to coordinate their activities. Here you see some of the hormones that we're going to be covering. We begin with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is a region of the brain that sits right on top of the pituitary gland that you see right here. The hypothalamus plays a large role in regulating homeostasis, maintaining a stable internal environment. The hypothalamus also exerts control over the pituitary gland. There are two parts to the pituitary gland. We have a posterior in the back, and we have an anterior in the front. The posterior pituitary releases two hormones, one called antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, and the second called oxytocin. Oxytocin is going to play a large role in childbirth. it's going to simultaneously cause two things to happen. One is the production of breast milk, and two is going to be uterine contractions. The other hormone released by the posterior pituitary is ADH, antidiuretic hormone. ADH is used in a negative feedback loop that is utilized within the body to regulate our blood osmolarity. Your blood osmolarity is the amount of solute within your blood. If your blood osmolarity goes up, you have too much solute, which means that you have too little water or you're dehydrated. You have osmoreceptors in your hypothalamus that are constantly analyzing your blood osmolarity. If your blood osmolarity increases, meaning you're dehydrated, the hypothalamus will cause two things to happen. One, it'll cause you to become thirsty. And two, it's going to cause your posterior pituitary gland to release antidiuretic hormone. ADH travels to your kidneys and operates on a part of the kidney called the collecting duct, which is at the end of a nephron, a part of the kidney. ADH causes your collecting duct or your kidneys to reabsorb more water. In other words, it's going to cause you to conserve water. And this, in effect, is going to lower your blood osmolarity. It's going to bring you down to the proper hydration. Many substances, such as caffeine and alcohol, will dehydrate you because they inhibit the release of ADH within your body. So instead of conserving water, you're going to flush out all of your water and become dehydrated. The anterior pituitary gland releases a whole mess of hormones. Many of these hormones, from here to here, these are all tropic hormones. They all leave the anterior pituitary and go to other glands in the body. This is why your pituitary gland is called your master gland. The only two hormones that are not tropic are going to be MSH and endorphins. MSH is a hormone that stimulates melanocytes, and melanocytes control your skin pigmentation. Endorphins are also non-tropic. They're going to travel to your brain and they're going to block pain receptors. We're going to cover all these tropic hormones in more depth now. The first tropic hormone is growth hormone. Growth hormone is actually both tropic and non-tropic. It's non-tropic because it stimulates overall growth within the body, particular growth of your bones. But it's also tropic because it travels from your pituitary gland to your liver, which is then going to cause your liver to release IGF, insulin-like growth factor. IGF operates a lot like growth factor in that it's going to stimulate growth of bones and cartilage. Another tropic hormone released by the pituitary gland is called prolactin. Prolactin travels from the anterior pituitary to the mammary glands and helps to stimulate milk production along with oxytocin. Here you see two important gonadotropins. These are tropic hormones released by the pituitary gland that travel to the male or female gonads, the testes or the ovaries. The first one is called follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH. The second one is called luteinizing hormone, or LH. FSH and LH are going to cause the male testes to secrete testosterone, or they're going to cause the female ovaries to release estrogen and progesterone. In either case, they're tropic because they're leaving the pituitary gland and they're traveling to other glands within the body. Another tropic hormone released by the anterior pituitary is adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH. This hormone leaves the anterior pituitary and travels to the adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and they cause the adrenal glands to then release adrenaline. Another very important tropic hormone is called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. This is a hormone released by the anterior pituitary gland that travels to the thyroid gland. Your thyroid gland sits in your neck and releases two hormones, T3 and T4. T3 and T4 are very similar. T4 is called thyroxine. The major difference between the two is their number of iodine. T3 has 3 iodine atoms and T4 has 4 of them. This is why children that have had iodine deficiencies have had issues with their thyroid glands not properly operating. These two thyroid hormones are very important within the body because they are going to maintain your metabolism. They control your metabolic rate. TSH is the tropic hormone released by the anterior pituitary that travels to your thyroid gland and tells your thyroid gland to then release these two hormones within the body. Your thyroid gland also releases another hormone called calcitonin. Calcitonin is going to operate with another hormone called parathyroid hormone. Calcitonin is released by the thyroid gland. Parathyroid hormone, or PTH, is released by the parathyroid glands. They are these small glands that you see right here that are located on top of the thyroid gland. Calcitonin and PTH are used to regulate your blood calcium levels. If blood calcium levels become elevated, they go up. Your thyroid gland is going to release calcitonin. Calcitonin takes the calcium out of your blood and deposits it in your bones, which is then going to lower your blood calcium levels. So calcitonin will actually make your bones stronger. If blood calcium levels decrease, they're too low, the parathyroid gland releases parathyroid hormone, which is going to take calcium out of your bones and put it back into your blood, raising your blood calcium levels. PTH will actually make your bones more brittle, make them weaker. Many women, as they get older, suffer from hyperparathyroidism. Their parathyroid glands become hyperactive. As a result, their bones become weaker and more brittle, and this can lead to osteoporosis. Blood glucose levels are maintained using two hormones, one called insulin, another called glucagon. Blood glucose levels are really important to monitor. We know that glucose is the cell's preferred energy source. Your blood glucose levels are maintained at a very steady and very specific level within the blood. Insulin and glucagon are both released by the pancreas. Insulin is released by beta cells in the pancreas, and glucagon is released by alpha cells in the pancreas. If your blood glucose levels go up, you eat something really sugary like a candy bar, the beta cells in your pancreas will release insulin. The major job of insulin is to take sugar, take glucose out of your blood, lowering blood glucose levels. Insulin does this by bringing sugar to all your body cells that need it. If body cells have enough glucose, the excess glucose will be shipped to your liver. Your liver will convert it to a polysaccharide called glycogen or glycogen. In either case, insulin takes glucose out of your blood, lowers blood sugar levels, and delivers glucose to all your body cells. If your blood glucose levels go low, they go down, maybe you skip breakfast, the alpha cells in your pancreas will release glucagon. Glucagon travels to your liver and takes that glycogen, that polysaccharide, and breaks it down into glucose and will flood the bloodstream with glucose. So it's going to raise glucose levels. Type 1 and type 2 diabetes are both diseases of the pancreas. Type 1 diabetes is the less common of the two. 90% of diabetics have type 2. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder. The individual's immune system actually mounts an attack on the beta cells of the pancreas. As a result, they cannot produce insulin, and a type 1 diabetic requires insulin injections anytime they consume food that has sugar. Type 2 diabetes is also called adult onset diabetes, and that's not caused by the immune system mounting an attack on the pancreatic cells, but it's caused by a reduced response of the target cells to insulin. And basically it can be caused by many different factors. One could be poor diet, lack of exercise, aging. Many different factors can cause type 2 diabetes. But basically, because insulin has been released so often within the body, that the body builds up a tolerance to the insulin and it loses its response. The good news about type 2 diabetes is that it can often be managed through exercise and dietary control. Here we see the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys. Your anterior pituitary gland is going to release ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. And this hormone travels from your pituitary gland to your adrenal glands and stimulates the release of hormones. There's two parts to the adrenal glands. You have the cortex, which is the outside, and you have the medulla, which is the inside. The adrenal cortex releases corticosteroids like cortisone. Cortisone is a catabolic steroid. It breaks things down within the body. In the adrenal medulla, epinephrine and norepinephrine are produced. These are commonly called adrenaline, and we know that adrenaline activates the sympathetic nervous system, this fight or flight response within the body. Here we see our last two glands, the gonads, the testes, and the ovaries. Remember, these two glands are also stimulated using tropic hormones, LH, luteinizing hormone, and FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. Here you can see that all three steroid hormones released by these two glands are very similar. You have testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. Both males and females contain all three of these hormones, but they produce them in different proportions, which is really what makes a male different than a female. The male testes produce a high amount of testosterone. Testosterone is an androgen which creates male secondary sex characteristics like facial hair and a deeper voice. The female ovaries produce estrogen and progesterone in higher quantities. Estrogen produces female secondary sex characteristics. Progesterone is going to play a role in pregnancy. It's going to cause the uterine wall to remain thick so that the zygote can implant itself. It's important to remember that these three hormones, these three steroid hormones, are present in both males and females. They're just present in different concentrations. All three of these hormones get released as the testes and the ovaries receive tropic hormones like LH and FSH. This concludes the endocrine system.